Emily Johnson was the girl everyone adored, bright, ambitious, and full of life. Brian Fields was the man everyone avoided, temperamental, reclusive, and harboring dark secrets. Their paths should never have crossed, but when they did, it led to a chilling crime that shattered the peace of Springfield and left a community grappling with unimaginable loss. What started as a quiet summer evening ended with Emily's brutal murder, and one overlooked clue would ultimately unravel the truth. Springfield was the kind of place where life felt simple and safe. Nestled between rolling hills and shaded by towering oaks, it was a town where neighbors waved from their porches and children rode their bikes until dusk. It was the last place anyone would expect to become the center of a gruesome mystery. For years, families had moved to Springfield to escape the chaos of city life, drawn by its reputation as a haven of peace. That illusion was shattered one warm summer evening when Emily Johnson, a vibrant and well-loved teenager, vanished without a trace. Emily was 16, full of life, and known for her bright smile. She excelled in school, played on the soccer team, and was a member of the debate club. Her parents, John and Sarah, described her as responsible and kind-hearted, a girl with big dreams of becoming a lawyer someday. That Friday evening, she attended a school fundraising event at the local community center. It was a lively gathering, buzzing with laughter and music, where Emily was last seen chatting with friends and enjoying the night. When the event ended, she said goodbye to her friends and began the short walk home, a route she had taken countless times before. But that night, Emily never made it back. When her parents realized she was late, their worry quickly escalated into panic. Emily wasn't the type to miss curfew without calling. They tried her phone, but there was no answer. Messages went unread. Within hours, they contacted the police, and the search for Emily began. Volunteers from the community joined in, scouring parks, alleys, and back roads. Flyers with Emily's picture were plastered on every lamppost and shop window. Her disappearance left an unsettling void in Springfield, the kind that gnawed at the hearts of everyone who had ever known her or felt safe in the town's embrace. 2 days later, the Johnson family's worst fears were realized. Emily's body was discovered by a group of hikers in a wooded area on the outskirts of town. The scene was horrifying. Emily had been the victim of a brutal attack, and the details were so grim that they were withheld from the public. The discovery plunged the town into a state of collective grief and disbelief. Parents held their children closer, and whispers of fear replaced the usual chatter at coffee shops and school drop-offs. Springfield was no longer the safe haven it had been. The police immediately launched an intense investigation, but answers were scarce. There were no witnesses, no clear suspects, and no apparent motive. Emily's death seemed senseless, a tragedy that defied explanation. The wooded area where she was found became the epicenter of a desperate hunt for clues. Every branch, every blade of grass was examined. But the more investigators searched, the more questions seemed to arise. The image of Emily's bright future was now overshadowed by a dark mystery that cast a pall over the town. In the days following Emily's death, Springfield's sense of security unraveled. Neighbors who once left their doors unlocked now double-checked every bolt. The Johnson family, consumed by grief, became a symbol of the fragile line between normalcy and catastrophe. The tragedy left everyone grappling with the same haunting question. Who could have done this to a young girl with her whole life ahead of her? The answer, as it turned out, would come from a detail so small that it was almost overlooked, a detail that would ultimately change everything. The wooded area where Emily Johnson's body was found became the focal point of a meticulous investigation. The crime scene, dense with foliage and shaded by tall pines, was eerily silent as investigators worked tirelessly to uncover anything that might explain her tragic fate. Yellow police tape cordoned off the site, and officers moved methodically, documenting every inch of the ground. Forensic specialists swept the area for evidence, collecting soil samples, fibers, and any physical traces that could shed light on what had happened. Emily's body showed signs of a struggle. There were bruises on her arms, scratches on her face, and evidence of defensive wounds. Her final moments were filled with a desperate fight for survival, a thought that deeply unsettled the officers on the scene. Her clothes were torn, her belongings scattered, and her phone was missing. Despite the violence evident in the attack, the area offered few immediate leads. No weapon was found, and no obvious trail pointed to her attacker. It was as if the perpetrator had vanished into thin air, leaving behind only the devastating aftermath. One detail, however, caught the attention of investigators. Emily's wristwatch, a small silver timepiece she wore daily, was still on her wrist. Though damaged, it had stopped at precisely 9:14 p.m. At first, it seemed like a minor observation. Perhaps the watch had broken during the struggle. Still, the timestamp was noted in the official report. Investigators couldn't know it then, but this seemingly insignificant detail would later prove pivotal in solving the case. The police expanded their search radius, looking for any signs of where Emily might have been before her body was left in the woods. Footprints were identified near the scene, but the soft soil made it impossible to determine the exact size or type of shoe. The path leading to the area showed faint tire tracks, suggesting a vehicle had been there recently. These tracks, too, were photographed and measured, but without a match. They were little more than pieces of a frustratingly incomplete puzzle. Back at the police station, detectives pored over Emily's life for answers. They interviewed her family, friends, teachers, and classmates, hoping to find someone who could provide a lead. Everyone described her as kind and popular, with no known enemies. Emily's social media accounts were analyzed, revealing her last posts to be cheerful and ordinary, photos of her friends at the fundraiser, captions about her plans for the summer. Yet hidden among the seemingly innocent interactions was something unsettling. Weeks before her death, Emily had received a series of anonymous messages. They were brief and cryptic, but carried an undertone of malice. "I'm watching you," one message read. "You'll regret it," said another. The sender had used a fake account, making it difficult to trace. The pieces of the investigation began to form a grim picture, but nothing yet led to a clear suspect. Frustration mounted among the detectives, who felt the pressure of a community desperate for answers. As the days passed without a breakthrough, the case began to feel like an impenetrable maze. Despite their efforts, the person responsible for Emily's death remained a shadow, lurking just out of reach. The woods held their secrets tightly, and it seemed as if justice for Emily might never come. As the investigation continued, Springfield's tranquil surface began to crack, revealing a web of secrets beneath. The police, working tirelessly to piece together the puzzle of Emily's murder, delved deeper into her life and the lives of those around her. What they uncovered hinted at a darker side to the seemingly idyllic town. Whispers of jealousy, betrayal, and hidden grudges emerged, casting suspicion in unexpected directions. Emily's friends and classmates were questioned again, and a few new details came to light. One of Emily's close friends reluctantly admitted that Emily had been uneasy in the weeks leading up to her death. She had mentioned feeling like she was being watched. It wasn't every day, but there were moments when she felt someone's eyes on her, even when she was alone. Emily had joked about it at first, brushing it off as paranoia, but her tone had changed over time. She didn't seem frightened, exactly, more unsettled, as if something wasn't quite right, but she couldn't put her finger on it. This revelation added urgency to the case, but it also raised more questions. If Emily had been targeted, why her? And by whom? The anonymous messages on her social media became a critical focus of the investigation. Forensic analysts worked to trace the source of the messages, but the sender had used sophisticated methods to cover their tracks. The account was created through a virtual private network, and the IP address led to a dead end. Despite the obstacles, the messages were chilling in their implications. Each one hinted at someone who knew Emily's movements and habits. One message referenced the fundraiser she attended on the night of her disappearance, sent just hours before she vanished. "See you tonight." Meanwhile, the Johnson family endured unimaginable grief. Emily's parents, John and Sarah, struggled to comprehend how their daughter could be taken from them in such a horrific way. Her younger brother, Ethan, retreated into silence, his once cheerful demeanor replaced by a solemn stillness. Their home, once filled with laughter and warmth, became a somber reminder of their loss. Neighbors brought food and condolences, but their efforts felt like small gestures in the face of such a monumental tragedy. The police expanded their investigation to include anyone who might have had a connection to Emily. Her teachers described her as a diligent and respectful student, while her soccer coach praised her for her determination and leadership. Yet beneath these glowing accounts, subtle tensions began to surface. A former teammate mentioned a falling out between Emily and another girl on the team. It had seemed minor at the time, a disagreement over a boy, but now it took on a new weight. Could jealousy have played a role in Emily's death? Or was it merely a coincidence? As Springfield's secrets continued to unravel, the town grew more anxious. Parents became overprotective, refusing to let their children out of sight. Strangers were eyed with suspicion, and every passing car felt like it might hold a hidden danger. Despite the mounting tension, the investigation seemed stalled. The police had pieces of a story, but no way to connect them. Every lead seemed to circle back to the same question: who had been watching Emily, and why? The woods where Emily was found loomed large in everyone's mind, a haunting reminder of the darkness that had invaded their community. For all their efforts, detectives couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something crucial. It was as if the truth was hidden in plain sight, just waiting for someone to notice it. Time was slipping away, and with it, the hope of bringing Emily's killer to justice. The investigation into Emily's murder seemed to have reached a deadlock. Weeks had passed since her body was discovered, and every promising lead unraveled into frustrating dead ends. The community's initial shock began to morph into anger, with growing demands for answers and justice. Tensions ran high, but despite the mounting pressure, the police had little to show for their efforts. That changed with an unexpected breakthrough. Mrs. Callahan, an elderly neighbor known for her sharp eyes and keen memory, approached the investigators with a piece of information that would reignite the case. On the night of Emily's disappearance, she had been watering her garden when she noticed a vehicle parked near the edge of the woods. It struck her as odd because that area rarely saw traffic after dark. The vehicle was a blue pickup truck with a dented rear bumper. Though she hadn't thought much of it at the time, the news of Emily's murder had made her recall the moment vividly. She couldn't remember the license plate, but her detailed description gave the police a new avenue to explore. Investigators began searching for all registered blue pickup trucks in the area. The process was time-consuming, but the lead was too specific to ignore. Their efforts soon narrowed down to Brian Fields, a local resident with a history of minor run-ins with the law. Brian was known around town for his temper and erratic behavior. He had no known connection to Emily, but the description of his truck matched Mrs. Callahan's account perfectly. Armed with a search warrant, the police arrived at Brian's modest home on the outskirts of Springfield. His property was unkempt, with overgrown grass and rusted tools scattered about. The blue pickup truck sat in the driveway, its dented bumper confirming their suspicions. Inside the vehicle, officers found a chilling discovery. Strands of hair, later confirmed to be Emily's, were caught in the upholstery. Soil samples taken from the truck's tires matched the dirt from the wooded area where her body had been found. These findings were damning, but what they found inside Brian's garage sealed his fate. Tucked away in a corner of the cluttered space was Emily's school backpack. It contained her textbooks, notes, and a few personal items, all untouched since the night of her disappearance. The discovery was a devastating confirmation of Brian's involvement. His connection to Emily remained unclear, but the evidence was undeniable. Brian was arrested on the spot and taken in for questioning. Despite the mounting evidence, Brian denied any involvement in Emily's murder. His demeanor was cold and detached, offering no clues to his motives. Investigators knew they needed more to secure a conviction, and they began piecing together the events of that fateful night. The tire tracks, the hair, the backpack, all pointed to Brian, but the most critical detail was still to come. As the investigation continued, it became clear that the smallest, most overlooked clue would be the one to unravel the truth and bring justice to Emily's family. Brian Fields sat in the interrogation room, steadfastly denying any involvement in Emily Johnson's murder. Despite the mounting evidence against him, he offered no explanation for why her belongings were found in his garage or why soil from the crime scene matched his truck tires. His calm, unyielding demeanor frustrated investigators, but they knew the evidence was enough to hold him. The case was building against him. Yet questions remained unanswered. What was his motive? How had he crossed paths with Emily, and why had he targeted her? And then there was the watch, a detail that investigators couldn't ignore. Emily's wristwatch, stopped at precisely 9:14 p.m., had been noted in the early stages of the investigation, but it was dismissed as a minor curiosity. Now, forensic analysts revisited it, hoping to uncover something they might have missed. The watch had been damaged, likely during the struggle, but its precise timestamp stood out. Experts confirmed that the type of damage it sustained, a shattered face and dislodged hands, aligned with a significant impact. This meant the watch had stopped at the exact moment of a violent collision. Investigators began to suspect that 9:14 p.m. was not just a random time, but the precise moment Emily had fallen or been struck. Piecing this together with the rest of the evidence, detectives reconstructed the timeline of Emily's last hours. The fundraiser had ended around 8:30 p.m., and she had left shortly after. Based on witness accounts, she was last seen walking toward home, a route that would have taken her past a secluded stretch of road near the woods. Brian's truck had been spotted in the same area by Mrs. Callahan, parked near the tree line. It became clear that Brian had likely intercepted Emily there. Forensic evidence from Brian's truck provided further clarity. Blood traces on the truck's interior matched Emily's DNA, and scratches on the exterior suggested she had tried to escape during the struggle. Investigators theorized that Brian had lured her into the truck under false pretenses, perhaps offering her a ride or pretending to need help. When she resisted, a physical altercation ensued, leading to her injuries and eventual death. The stopped watch corroborated this, marking the moment she had fallen or been fatally injured. When confronted with this timeline and the overwhelming evidence, Brian's composure cracked. Faced with no way to refute the forensic findings, he confessed. He admitted to attacking Emily in a fit of rage after she rejected his advances. He had followed her that night, fixated on his own warped intentions, and lashed out when she fought back. Panicking, he drove her to the woods, leaving her there to avoid being caught. The community of Springfield was rocked by the revelations. Brian's confession brought some measure of closure, but it couldn't erase the pain of losing Emily. Her parents, though devastated, found solace in knowing her killer had been brought to justice. The stopped watch, a tiny yet crucial detail, had been the key to unlocking the truth. As the case came to a close, Springfield slowly began to heal. The memory of Emily's vibrant life remained in the hearts of those who loved her. Her story became a reminder of the importance of vigilance and the resilience of justice, proving that even the smallest details could shine a light in the darkest moments.